As we discussed last week, evolution is about variation in the natural world. As a first step in beginning to understand that variation, we need to think about how variation actually works in the world, how it's organized. You as an individual are one form of that organization, but the organization is hierarchically built upon that. So for example, you are part of a larger population, and we're part of a species. This natural hierarchy of variation is the product of the fact that we share common descent, that we come from related groups of individuals. This means that we, as a species, share certain features with related species. Those group of related species, meanwhile, share features with other related species, so that we have a nested form of variation. As humans, then, one first step to beginning to understand the variation that we see is thinking about who our relatives are in the natural world, how we're related to other individuals. Here we are at Southwick Zoo in Mendon, Massachusetts, to talk about humans as primates. First and foremost, we can think of primates as a special kind of mammal. Like all mammals, primates give birth to live animals and nurse their young through breast milk. But primates are kind of special in many different ways. They have a number of characteristics that distinguish them as a group relative to other mammals. First of all, primates tend to be social organisms. They tend to live in groups. Associated with this sociality, primates tend to have slightly larger brains relative to their body size than most mammals. In addition to being social, most primates tend to be arboreal, preferring tropical forest habitats. As we move into some of the higher primates, such as the chimpanzees behind me, this begins to break down as the larger body size corresponds with increasing use of terrestrial resources as well. Anatomically, primates also share a number of features. They tend to have orbits which are facing anteriorly and reflect the fact that they are very visually prioritized in terms of their behaviors. Visual senses are very important for primates, in part because of that arboreal habitat. Many primates, many lower primates, tend to rely on their vision to find food, in addition to move around in a very three-dimensional arboreal environment. Other features that primates share in common are opposable hands, with a thumb that's opposable to the rest of the palm. This again reflects the locomotor behaviors through complex arboreal environments. Having a thumb that allows you to grip onto distal branches is an important primate characteristic. Primates also have soft, fleshy hands, and for the most part they lack claws, instead having nails just like you and I have. Now, humans aren't just any kind of primate. We evolved out of a specific group of primates that we generally refer to, at least commonly, as apes. Today, there aren't that many apes on the planet. There are only 4 genera of living apes outside of humans. These include Pan, the genus that includes chimpanzees and bonobos, chimpanzees like the ones behind me here. It also includes gorilla. There are several species of gorilla living in Africa today. It also includes the genus Pongo, which are the orangutans from Southeast Asia. And finally, the hylobatids, gibbons and siamangs living in Southeast Asia. Now, these apes today represent only a small fraction of the apes that lived in the past. We think in the Miocene, something we'll talk about actually in a couple weeks, there were dozens, if not hundreds of different species of apes on the planet. This reflects the fact that more than 20 million years ago, when apes first began to appear in the fossil record, the world had much larger tropical forests extending across large parts of Eurasia, in addition to Africa. This meant that these were great habitats for apes to live in and thrive in and diversify in. The apes we have today are just a small fraction of that. Apes, however, relative to other primates, tend to be larger in body size. Corresponding with that larger body size is they tend to lack a tail. All the living apes lack a tail, and there's some question as to whether or not we have any fossil apes that actually preserve a tail. Apes engage in a variety of different locomotor behaviors. The chimpanzees behind me are very generalized locomotors capable of a wide range of locomotor activities. Now, primarily we think of them as knuckle walkers, meaning they're quadrupedal, utilizing both their forelimbs and their hind limbs. But apes are also very good suspensory movers, using their arms to climb and swing through trees. The gibbons and siamangs are true suspensory primates. We refer to this as brachiation, where their primary locomotor behavior is actually using their forelimbs to swing from branch to branch within the high canopy of Southeast Asia. The largest bodied of the apes, male orangutans and gorillas, tend to be less arboreal, especially as adults, given their large body size, and are more strictly quadrupedal, especially on terrestrial ground. Humans, of course, are a specialized ape that are particularly strange in our locomotor behavior and that we're very specialized to a single kind of locomotor pattern, that being bipedality, moving across the landscape on 2 feet. So in beginning to think about human variation, beginning to think about how we might question variability in the fossil record, it's necessary to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and want to understand where this variation came from. In the context of humans, that means looking at the shared patterns of behavior, morphology, and general variation that we associate with being a primate, a particular kind of mammal. And humans aren't just any kind of primate, but we've evolved out of the apes sometime in the past 2 million years. And while there aren't that many species of apes on the planet today, they cover a wide range of variation, from the very large gorillas to the much smaller gibbons and siamangs. They have different kinds of locomotor behaviors, they have different kinds of habitats that they occupy, they engage in different kind of social behaviors. So you have, for example, gorillas that are single male, multi-female groups that involve high degrees of sexual dimorphism, all the way down to gibbons, which tend to exist as monogamous pairs with essentially no sexual dimorphism or no characteristic differences between males and females. So in trying to understand where human patterns of variation came from, we first have to take a step back and think about these larger patterns of variation. Evolution is descent with modification, descent from a common ancestor in the past. This creates these kinds of bundled, hierarchical patterns of variation, shared variation as a result of this common descent. So in this week, we'll be covering the primates and how human variation compares to the kind of variation that we see in primate systems.